club, talking about revolutionary apps and what role they can play in activism and protest. The conversation kind of came back to journalism, new media. What kind of role do you play? Are you a blogger or a journalist? Where do you fall on this divide?
Well, I worked with the news as a photographer, so I've never really felt bold enough to call myself a journalist. Besides, my spelling is absolutely atrocious. And I think that by calling myself a blogger, I have the freedom to insert myself into the story. So for me, I massively respect trained journalists and their ability to sit on the fence and tell stories with a certain authority, although many trained journalists are getting paid for that. A lot of bloggers aren't getting paid. So I'm hoping that by showing how passionate I am in a particular story and how involved I am in the story, I take the viewer on a journey with me. All good stories are journeys after all, and that way, I guess Hunter S. Thompson would have called it Gonzo journalism, but nowadays it's just called blogging.
So is that the distinction for you, that you being on the inside and being able to tell a story from an insider's perspective versus the objective authority of a journalist? Is that distinction really true these days, do you think, or is the line a bit more blurred than that?
The lines are always blurred, and there's lots of journalists blurring the lines right now as they get involved in newer technologies. But for me, speaking from nearly always a position of ignorance, by being inside the story and asking questions from the bottom, learning as I go up, I feel I get more of a rounded idea of what's going on, rather than doing my research beforehand and then thinking I know what the story is.
So do you think it's a positive thing for the media environment? Is it going to push journalists to report differently? Do you think overall more people, more voices is going to make better journalism for everybody?
It's important that trained journalists are on all the channels where the amateur people practicing journalism are, because they need to lead by example. Journalists have these skills for a reason, because ultimately there is a correct way of telling the news. The truth has to come to the very forefront of these stories, and that can sometimes get blurred when people get too emotional or too carried away with the way that they document.
And if there's going to be a move towards more kind of ethical standards or codes or whatever you want to call it that are closer to the professional journalist field for citizens, do you think journalism as a kind of defined role would become more about curation and aggregation, or is there always going to be a strong role for the actual telling of the news?
Well, I don't think storytelling should ever be policed in any way. That's why I say lead by example. I think that curation wins hands down over curation. For me, it's always going to be human web. It's going to be human beings taking elements of the story and creating the long-form story from whatever channels they find it on. And it's down to the trained journalists in many ways to decide how that is done.
Thank you very much. This is Tanya O'Carroll reporting for Vision on TV.